So we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Aloni, and I'm with Schneps Media. Schneps Media is the largest local media company in the New York metro area. We publish over 70 newspapers, magazines, websites, webinars, podcasts, and events throughout Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, Westchester, Long Island, and Philadelphia. Today, we're thrilled to be able to bring you college admissions and financial aid secrets. If you have a teen that's headed to college in the next year or two and you're stressed out and confused about how you're possibly going to afford tuition and how they'll manage to get into a decent college, you're going to want to pay close attention to tonight's event and take a lot of notes. So I am pleased to introduce Andy Lockwood, best-selling author, college admissions and financial aid expert, and owner of Lockwood College Prep in Glenwood Landing. Welcome, Andy.
Hi, thanks for having me. And that's co-owner, me and my wife. By the way, we're literally a mom and pop shop.
That's fantastic. So let's dive right in. I know everyone wants to hear all about your secrets. So you've been a college advisor for more than 20 years, and you've seen all sorts of economic and political changes. Coronavirus is new. How has that changed the college landscape, and how is it the same?
So first, I should just note that even though I'm a college advisor, I've yet to be indicted. I bill myself now as Long Island's greatest unindicted college advisor. So yeah, there's been a lot of changes, even before coronavirus. And I think in many ways, coronavirus was sort of a catalyst to exaggerate or speed up, I guess, some of these trends. And one of those trends is that it's been getting harder and harder to get in. If you look at the numbers, and this past year, because of COVID, most competitive colleges saw a huge uptick in applications going in, being submitted. So mostly 30-40% increases, which are pretty substantial, but some schools saw a lot more. Colgate University had an increase of 102% of their applications going in. And it's not necessarily that there were more qualified applicants submitting their applications. It's just that many colleges became test optional. They didn't mandate the SAT or the ACT. A lot of kids couldn't visit colleges, so they just submitted more applications blindly almost. So if you look at the statistics, though, it was pretty alarming, and it was kind of a bloodbath for many kids who graduated in 2021.
Wow. So a lot of those options that may have been on the table for them really weren't because of this increase in applications. Is that true?
Well, like I alluded to before, it wasn't that there were more qualified applicants submitting applications in. A lot of people submitted their applications without their test scores. In many cases, it's because they couldn't take the test because the test centers were shut down. But not so much in certain pockets of the country, like Long Island, where a lot of private schools, the parochial ones in particular, offered the testing in school. So when the dust settled, it's actually still settling, but it looks like that most colleges, the kids who got in, at least 70 to 75% of them submitted their SAT or ACT scores. The percentage was a lot higher, like Georgetown University, 93% of people who were admitted submitted their scores. So test option wasn't really all that it was cracked up to be. And cream still rose to the top, at least in terms of academic performance. And I'm not saying that the tests are perfect and they're, that's a whole nother discussion, which is way out of the scope, I think, of tonight. Right. I'm just giving you the lay of the land.
Well, speaking about the SATs and the ACTs, what is your advice about that, about the test optional piece?
Well, I mean, based on, what I suspected before the dust settled and now, I think that you have to take the tests and take them seriously and get as high, score as you can, and then decide on a case-by-case basis whether or not to submit them to each of the colleges on your list. Because if you don't submit the scores, then what happens is, just mathematically, everything else on the application becomes a lot more important. So that means your GPA is weighted more, which it was always the most important thing, but so too is your rigor, how many advanced classes like AP or IB classes, and then your recommendations and all these other things. So I would still try to, max out on your scores. The other thing that gets overlooked a lot that I want to bring up here is that when it comes to colleges that award merit scholarships for kids that they want to come, as bribes, most of those schools still relied on SAT or ACT scores. So I had a few kids call me last year with mixed news. They, on one hand, they were very excited to have gotten into their top choice school without submitting their scores, but then when it came to finding out what they received for scholarships, the answer was, well, I'm sorry, you didn't qualify because you didn't submit your SAT or your ACT. So those scores are still important for money.
Wow. Okay, that's a big thing to know. In your opinion, do you think it's going to be harder or easier for kids moving forward to getting into top colleges, this coming up in the future?
So I think there's going to be fewer applications going in for high school class of 22, the kids I'm working with for the summer. But I still think the numbers are going to be pretty daunting, like the raw statistics. But again, when you peel back the onion a couple of layers, I think if you're qualified to get in, you still get in. Mm-hmm. Where we saw a little bit of a discrepancy this past year was, for the most part, virtually all of our clients got into at least one of their top 3 schools. But some of their, so-called safety schools where they were slam dunks to get in did not admit them. Didn't really matter because they got into, one of the top 3 schools they were hoping to get into. But I think a lot of these colleges, faced with this huge influx of applications, if they had a choice of admitting someone who clearly was not going to go there, even though they had superior academic credentials, many of these schools opted for kids with slightly lesser credentials from the same high school or elsewhere and let them in. And that's very important to colleges. It's called the yield. It's the ratio of kids that they admit versus who actually show up and matriculate. So if that is a bad yield, if that ratio, if too many kids say thanks but no thanks, that actually hurts the college in a few different ways. So I think a lot of these colleges did not let in, clearly superior academically qualified kids because they were protecting their yields.
Got it. That makes sense. So let's turn to financial aid. Many parents assume that they can't possibly qualify for anything. Is that accurate?
Well, it's an assumption that may or may not be true. It's a case by case thing, but just if you look at the numbers, and this might be surprising to a lot of people, the average discount nationally at a private, expensive college is now more than 52.4%. So that means there's a lot of discounting going on. Yeah. At any given college, roughly only about 25% of the families pay full boat. They're subsidizing the other 75%. So I won't bore you with more stats, but what that all adds up to is that paying full price is really a choice. It's not an obligation. And for many reasons, mostly because colleges are businesses and they need money, they would prefer to give money to mostly families who are in 6 figures, mass affluent, high income families versus super low income families, because they can't afford to do that. So they'd rather a $75,000 a year school would rather give 4 $15,000 scholarships to families making $150,000 to $200,000, for example, as opposed to stroking a check for $60,000 to a super low income family, because they can't afford to do that.
That makes a lot of sense. So how does financial aid work? I know there's also a lot of big changes that you're going to share with us about too.
Yeah, there's a few sources of money, and that's important to understand. But then there's one thing that gets overlooked a lot too. So I'm be very conscious here of not going down the rabbit hole too far, because there are 1,100 pages of regulations behind the federal financial aid form, which is the easy form. So we could, I don't think we want to be here till 3 a.m. Right? You have something else to do, I hope. Okay. So
I'll find something like watching paint dry.
Exactly. Listening to it might be even worse. So there's one bucket, so to speak, of aid called need-based aid, and it's based on financial need, which is based on how you look on paper, your income, your savings, and there's a lot of nuances to it, but basically it's income and savings. Number of kids in college is currently a factor, and I'll come back to that. Then there's something called merit aid, which I kind of mentioned in passing before, which is really anything that's not need-based. It's money from the colleges that's based on, it could be grades, it could be scores, it could be community service. It has nothing to do with your income for the most part. And again, gross oversimplification. See, I practiced law for 5 years, and I'm in remission right now. So I'm twitching with all these disclaimers. I'm trying to do a balance here. Okay.
I understand.
And then there's a third source, at least, for the clients that we work with, and mostly for high income business owners who have more tax strategies to be able to employ in order to free up money that may be, quote unquote, buried in their business. So there's a way to pay for college with pre-tax dollars, and there's all sorts of other techniques and tools. So those are the three buckets.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of how the process actually works, most colleges require you to file for financial aid. And there may be some reasons not to do that. I just don't believe in them. But sometimes people don't want to file because they think they're not going to qualify. But that might be a mistake. Those financial aid applications, vary from school to school. Every college requires the federal form, which is the FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. About 400 colleges, mostly private schools, require an additional form called the CSS profile. Those have their own deadlines that are separate and apart from the college admissions application deadlines. So there's like all this stuff that you have to keep track of. And many families wake up too late and they realize that they missed deadlines, or they make all sorts of other mistakes. They don't understand what should be disclosed on the forms and what shouldn't be. So they sabotage themselves sometimes by oversharing, certain information. So it is complicated just to keep track of all this.
A lot. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're just trying to get your kid into college and it's very confusing. Is that something that you help your clients with, managing this whole process and all the paperwork? And
yeah, what most clients hire us for is, we're sort of a one-stop shop. So we help with financial aid, which is kind of unusual. We do all the paperwork. My wife does, I should say. She does the real work. We help with, trying to optimize your ability to get in where you want to get in. But something I mentioned to you kind of offline is that if I had to make a sweeping criticism about how parents approach this, how guidance counselors, how other college advisors approach this whole thing, I think there's too much emphasis on, okay, should you take the SAT 16 times? What's your essay going to be about? Should you run all over the country like a chicken with your head cut off visiting colleges? All that stuff, is important, but those are sort of lower level, I guess, tactical, as opposed to higher level strategic types of considerations. And I always liken that to, you wouldn't just rush to the airport and have no idea where the flight was going. You would, but that's kind of how people do it. So what we do, and this is not right for everyone by any stretch, is we actually look at this as, not about the 4 artificial years of someone's life, but it's more about the 40 or 50 years. And we actually start with career counseling and trying to figure out how kids are wired and what that could translate into in terms of, places in the world, plural, where they could be, super happy and work doesn't feel like work. It feels like play, at least most of the time. And they can make a living. They can get off the mom and dad full ride scholarship. So in a way, even though we have kids who get into Ivy League schools and those types of super competitive schools, I really don't care where they go to school. I'm trying to help them launch to be successful after school. So if we have kids who go into regular schools, who go to community colleges, who take gap years, it's all over the board.
It's a really good point because, like you said, this is only 4 years, but you want to go in with a plan, with an end, and thinking about the end in mind. And I think a lot of people, they don't think about that. And what is going to be your career and what is going to be able to make you money and all of those things. So it's great to think that's something that you can help your teen with. And it's not that they make a decision for the rest of their life, but they can have a direction.
So, right. So one of the objections I get is, well, how is a 16, 17-year-old kid supposed to know what they want to do with the rest of their life? And I said, no, they don't. They can't know because they don't even know the right questions to ask themselves. They can't answer that question. And our objective is not to come up with the one thing. It's not like, the heavens part and a ray of light shines down, you hear angels singing. It's more like, here are 4 or 5 things that based on your wiring, you should really love to do because other people with your identical wiring report super high levels of job satisfaction. And now let's look at the growth outlook, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and other places. That's a starting point because, it's not a big deal to change majors, but if you do it 2 or 3 times, hello, you're on the 6-year plan, it's $75,000 a year. Right. And that's not fun for most parents. I have 4 kids. There's no way any of them are doing that. Or you could be even worse. You get out of college with your degree in, sociology or something, and not to be politically incorrect, but that could get you a job at Starbucks or Chipotle or something.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing wrong with studying that, but do it on your own time. Don't major in it.
I mean, to me, that is like the hugest jewel that you're giving everybody, is to understand the importance of helping your teen have a plan beyond the 4 years. And that's exciting that that's something that you do in your company.
Yeah,
So
it's multiple. By the way, it's multiple. It's a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and so forth. It's never just one thing, because it's okay to change your mind. But ideally, you're at a college that is reputable across this, this cluster of majors and careers that we help them, explore. So then if and when you do change, it's okay.
fantastic. So you wrote a book. I love the name of this book, How to Negotiate Your Crappy Financial Aid and Merit Aid Offer.
Classy.
I love the name, but also I didn't even know that you could negotiate. So you're telling me you can negotiate with a college? How does a family do that?
So yes, the title is extremely classy and highbrow. It's like the National Enquirer of college financial aid books.
Get us to the point. That's what I like.
So you know what I mean? So just as a side note, so much of getting into college is about how you market yourself. That's what I'm doing with the title of this book. I mean, I know I'm a pretty good college advisor, but I'm a great marketer of those services. So when you apply to college, you have 50 to 90,000 other kids who look potentially exactly the same as you on paper. How do you jump out? How does your essay stand out? How your applications, your interviews, and all that? So when I write books, I usually have titles that I think are, and I test them, that I think are going to catch attention. So another one was how to get into your, I just happen to have it here, how to get into your dream college without lying, bribing, or photoshopping, right? So
Nice.
yeah. So back to your question. So the negotiation thing is that, and a lot of parents that go through this, they don't realize that once they receive a financial aid award, which is a questionable term sometimes, it's an offer. It's not written in stone. And if it's a need-based offer, if it's based on your financial information that you've disclosed on your FAFSA and your other financial aid applications, then a lot of times that doesn't tell the whole story, because the formulas are flawed. So for example, they don't factor in expenses. So a lot of families here in Long Island, where we are, have mid six-figure incomes, but they're paying a ton of money in taxes and property taxes and you name it. Whereas a family in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, could have the same exact income, but they would be viewed the same way by the financial aid formulas. So it's kind of screwy. So one way to negotiate, the financial aid officers actually call it appeal, is to tell them about mitigating circumstances. Like, I know I look one way on paper, but here's the reality. Here's what's different. Another way is to have colleges that give competing offers. Colleges that compete with each other, that give competing offers. So a lot of time, I'm trying to play offers, an offer from the B list college off against the top school, and trying to say, listen, your offer is great. I'd love to go there. However, I got a better offer from this other school, and that's the only thing keeping me from rushing in my housing deposit and committing to you. So is there any way that you could match or maybe even exceed this other offer? So there's a few different tactics to take when it comes to negotiating or appealing.
Okay. Now, you mentioned also about multiple kids in college at one time. Is that another thing that would be a mitigating factor you'd want to share with the school?
So yes, so sort of. What I mean by that is currently, and this gets into some of the changes. So currently, you actually improve your eligibility if you have more than one child in college, just formulaically. So there's and again, I'm trying to stay out of the rabbit hole in the time that we have here. But there's the main term in financial aid is called the expected family contribution, EFC, which, by the way, is also changing, but that's for another day. And
Stay tuned.
And that's it's supposed to symbolize how much the government thinks that you can actually qualify to pay for college. It's no one's ever happy with it. It doesn't mean that's what you're going to pay. There's a lot of flaws with that too. But if you have one child in college and your expected family contribution is, let's say, $50,000, and then a couple years later, child number 2 goes to college, and everything else, your income, your savings, everything else stays exactly the same, that EFC under the current rules would get split between the two kids. So it'd be $25,000 for each kid, which is a good thing. One of the bad news is one of the changes that was just effectuated in January 2021 as part of the CARES Act, the coronavirus relief bill, where they stuffed in all this other stuff, was FAFSA reform, the federal financial aid application reform. And there's some good changes like simplifying it, cutting it back from 100 something questions to, it looks like it's going to be about 36 questions. But one of the bad changes was that there's no more credit or allowance for having more than one child in college. And there seems to be no rhyme or reason to it. It could change back. It could revert to the way it was. I think there's some people trying to lobby. Some of my colleagues are trying to lobby to send it back the way it was. But right now, that's a really bad change.
For sure. So I wanted to let everyone know there is going to be a free book giveaway. And we'll get to that in a minute. But what about the 529? Is it good to have or bad?
So I'm going to give another recovering attorney wishy-washy answer because that's my bread and butter. The thing about the 529 is not whether it penalizes you, it's how much. So the 529 is sold as a college investment program, not widely adopted, by the way. I was actually surprised to learn a couple of years ago that roughly 19% of families have a 529. So if you don't have one, if you're watching this, it's okay. You've got plenty of company. But the thing about the 529, like I was saying before, is that it counts against you as an asset in the financial aid formulas. So it has tax benefits, earnings grow tax-free, if you use it for college purposes, qualified higher education expenses, then it's fine. But the deal is that if you are otherwise going to qualify for financial aid and you have a 529, that reduces your eligibility. On the other hand, for other families, let's say you make, $800,000 a year. We have a lot of clients who, make money in that neighborhood or higher, 7 figures. The 529 is great because it's a way to grow your earnings tax-free, and it's a good thing. So it really depends on your situation. There's other situations besides those two that I just outlined.
So is that one of the things that you can work with people on too, in terms of looking at their finances, if they pre-plan ahead enough?
Yeah. So, most of the people who come to us, they sort of feel like they have a gun to their head. It's like in 11th grade or 10th grade or whatever. The earlier we get involved, the better, we can be. But for the most part, people aren't coming to us because I'm not a financial planner. I don't sell financial products or anything like that. But what I can tell you is that we do spend a fair amount of time advising people who have money saved in the wrong places. And the 529 may or may not be, depending on the family and the situation and the colleges they're applying to also. Or they might have money saved in their children's name in like a trust account. That's a really bad thing for financial aid purposes. Sometimes, not across the board, but sometimes it makes sense to take money out of a place, a type of account that's penalizing you much more severely and sheltering it legally, by the way, ethically, morally, in a type of account that does not penalize you at all. And that doesn't, like I said, that doesn't work for everyone, but when it works, it really works beautifully.
So there are these things that you need to be aware of in how you're keeping your money when you're doing financial aid.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal wrote an article a long time ago and I remember the headline was along the lines of, in financial aid, it's not how much you have saved, it's where. And that's what they were referring to, which is that some types of savings penalize you far more than others, and some don't penalize you at all.
Okay, thank you. All right, so before we're going to tell everyone how they can get a copy of your book on negotiating with colleges, can we do a lightning round of questions, and then we'll open it up for the listeners to ask questions? That sounds good?
Like a game show.
Yeah, a little game show.
Okay.
So what is the biggest mistake families make when planning for college?
Well, one of them, I guess, we just alluded to, which is starting too late in the process. I think the earlier you start, even if you're not quite, quote unquote ready, that doesn't mean that the trains leave, not going to leave the station, right? I mean, the train pulls into Grand Central and leaves whether or not you're ready. It's on its own time frame. So that is certainly a big one. Another one that I mean, there's so many mistakes. It's very hard for me to pick one, but one that I mentioned before just sort of as a side note, when it comes to financial aid, is how generous the colleges are. So I speak to a lot of people who are stunned that, they have low income, or they think it's low income. They don't have much money saved for college, and they're stunned that they didn't get any type of decent financial aid award from the 2 or 3 schools that they were hoping to get from. And they tell me what the schools are, and I think to myself, of course not. It doesn't matter what you look like on paper. It's that these schools don't have money at all. So that's the most, I would say, one of the most frequently overlooked aspects that I hardly ever see anyone talk about or write about or anything. It's that some colleges are very generous, and some colleges are really stingy. And if you only apply to the stingy ones, it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. You're not going to succeed at all. It's just futile.
That's huge. I mean, that really is a huge piece of information to get, because in a million years, I would kind of think it was an even playing field, that there's money and, to be given. So that's huge, to take a look at the colleges that you're going to be applying to and what they're giving, I guess.
How generous they are. Yeah. I mean, that's a tacit sort of assumption that everyone thinks that, oh, well, I need money. My kid's a good student, then, we're going to get a ton of scholarships and grants and all that. But that's just not the case at every school across the board, because again, some schools have more of an endowment than others, and your kid stacks up differently against the cohort that they're competing with at different schools too. I mean, your kid can be the greatest thing since sliced bread, in your own family or maybe in your high school, but when you're viewed against your actual competitors, which are worldwide, it's not kids from your high school, it's kids from other high schools in your state, in other states, and frequently in other countries. Wow. Yeah, then it may be a different type of comparison.
Okay, great. So, I mean, I think that surprised me, but what is the most surprising things families learn when going through the process? Even if it's too late to learn it, what's most surprising? You've already said a few things here that I'm surprised about.
Yeah. I know. It really varies from family to family, but I think on the good side, a lot of people are surprised that colleges negotiate. On the bad side, I think a lot of people are surprised that kids didn't get into schools that their guidance counselors or Naviance, which most high schools use, which I personally don't because it's flawed as a college predictive tool. They don't get into schools that they thought that they should have or they deserved, which is a great word, to get into. And I think a lot of that is not understanding objectively where your kid stacks up. And it also comes from a lack of understanding what admissions officers look at. So just to round out that discussion. So I bet a lot of people watching this are familiar with Naviance if they have kids who are in 10th or 11th grade. And what Naviance does, the way families mostly use it, is it'll look at your child's GPA and any test scores that are known. And then you plug in a college and you see where other kids from your high school, where you stand compared to them in terms of your grades and your scores. Mm-hmm. The flaws are pretty significant. One is that you're not, and this is going to sound weird, I know, to many people. So I'm saying, just believe me. I'm saying, like, you can have your own beliefs. So I'm just telling you my truth. You're not competing with kids from your high school. You're competing with kids all over the world. There's no quotas at high schools. People think that, but you talk to any admissions officer. I have 3 that work for me. I'm pretty, I have a very good active relationship with a business partner of mine who was on the admissions committee of Princeton for 30 years. And he was one of the founders of the college board, or one of the guys behind the college board, I should say. And I can swear up and down until Tuesday that you're not competing with kids from your high school, but you are viewed in that context. It's different. Like each high school has its own profile. So anyway, so Naviance only looks at you versus your high school, which is a completely artificial and many times misleading comparison. That's the first problem. The second is that the admissions decision is predicated on so much more than just your GPA and your SAT or ACT scores. And we already talked about test optional, but your grades, your scores, and your rigor, APs or IBs, those 3 things in the aggregate are roughly 60% of the equation. So Naviance ignores part of that and completely all of the other 40%. And in that other 40%, it's a combination of stuff that you can't control and stuff that you like race and ethnicity.
Mhm.
But then there's stuff that you can control, like your character and your leadership and, your extracurriculars in school, out of school, summer stuff, essays, interviews, things that go into this body of work that ultimately gets judged from, for most kids, ninth grade forward. For many kids, even earlier, if they take advanced classes in middle school. And the biggest problem or surprise, just to get back to that question, is that a lot of kids don't realize this, or parents don't realize this until they have their big college meeting, the sit down with their high school guidance counselor in 11th grade.
Wow.
And then they may find out, if they have a good counselor, all the stuff they should have done for the last 2 years.
Mm.
And that's a easily avoidable self-inflicted wound.
Yeah. I'm actually very surprised to hear that there isn't a school quota, because that is something that I had always been told, that there was a school quota. So that's
False.
Wow. This is just like, phew, my brain is exploding. This is really great information. So can a family, I mean, with all this information that you've given us, I mean, I can only imagine the additional information that we haven't even touched upon. So can a family plan for college on their own?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's if you're a do-it-yourselfer type of person, and you love to dig in and research stuff up and down, you do your own tax returns, your own plumbing, your own taxidermy. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're a real do-it-yourselfer, that's fine. If you have a good perspective and you understand that things are basically going to work out no matter what, even if your kids ups and downs, that's fine. But I in my own little weird corner of the universe, I tend to attract people who are like, this is so overwhelming to me. I don't even know where to start. I don't even know the right questions to ask. I'm not getting the type of help I had hoped to get from my public school or private school. We have a lot of kids in private schools, and I just need someone to take me by the hand and show me the way. And that's more of a white glove, type of thing. Just to say, listen, I don't do my own taxes. I have an accountant. I don't do my own estate planning or insurance stuff. I go to other people who are specialists in that area. And depending on how you look at it, fortunately or unfortunately, going to college is so much more complicated than it was, when you were applying to school and when I was applying to school. It's so much because of all the marketing that these colleges, these businesses, even though they're nonprofit, which is hilarious, that they've done, and they've kind of perpetuated this relentless pressure and stress on kids and moms, more moms than dads typically. So if you're feeling stressed out and overwhelmed and you don't know where to start, that is the time to seek help. It doesn't have to be for me. I'm just saying in general that's the right time. But if you do it yourself, you may not need to do it.
Right. Well, look, I think I think you make a really good point talking about how you get an accountant and you hire people to help you do complicated things in your life. And this is certainly a hugely important piece for your child's life. Not, as we said, not just the fact that it's college, that's not it, but it's really the planning of their future, their life. So when is the
sorry to interrupt you. So there's two aspects, right? There's that, which is, to me, that's huge. But there's also not creating financial ruin for yourself. It's being able to afford college comfortably without having to sacrifice your lifestyle or mortgage your home or your retirement up to the eyeballs. I mean, there's a lot of mistakes that people make that are easily avoidable. And had they consulted with someone who could save them tens of thousands of dollars or help their kids avoid changing majors 3 or 4 times and coming home after freshman year with their tail between their legs, and feeling depressed and anxiety, that's hard to put a price on, but that's what we try to do.
Right. Okay. That's powerful. So when is the best time to start?
Definitely in utero.
Now, we all miss that. We all miss that.
Oh, that's awkward. I have another wishy-washy answer if you're keeping score at home here. So on one hand, like I said before, your body of work starts in 9th grade or even earlier. Every decision you make, every inflection point, every class you're thinking about taking, extracurricular, in school, out of school, etc., that all has repercussions when you make that closing argument hopefully the summer before your senior year, when you tackle your applications and essays. That's when we have our kids do it. On the other hand, and I meet with a lot of kids, a lot of all ages. I have found, and this should not be a surprise to anyone, that a lot of kids who are 9th and 10th grade just aren't really, or even 8th grade, just aren't really ready to focus on this. Mm-hmm. And it's a waste of money. We're not cheap, right? It's a premium service that we offer. And I'll say to the parents, privately afterward, I'll say, I don't want you to waste your money. I don't think that he's coachable or she's coachable. I don't think she's going to benefit from the advice that, it's proven, but only if it's taken. So that's why I'm a little wishy-washy on when the best time to start is. I mean, the best time to start thinking about this stuff is now, which, hopefully people are going to take some sort of action after watching this and not just forget about it in a half hour, when Jeopardy comes on or something. But in terms of, if you're serious about, potentially working with someone, I would make sure that your child is willing to take advice and hear the facts as they are. And frankly, parents also, at least as far as I'm concerned, it helps a lot if they're willing, if they have an open mind and they're willing to, have someone call it like he sees it. Because a lot of people have expectations that just can't be met no matter what. We don't have a magic wand. We can't just wave it and, oh, you're into Yale. Oh, Princeton. It doesn't work that way.
Right. I'm sure you have to coach the parents too on their expectations and all that.
We do SAT and ACT prep, which is extremely stressful for kids. And my tutor and I have this joke, which is not really a joke, is that anytime we have a kid with test anxiety, who's doing really well on the practice tests, but just losing it on the real test because of anxiety, the joke is anxiety flows downhill. It's almost always a situation where the parents, and let's face it, the mom is putting all this pressure on the kid and they're just tensing up.
That's a good point. A good thing to remember and not forget when we're dealing with our kids, not to stress them out.
Easier said than done. Like I said, I have 4 kids, 2 in college, 2 on the way. It's a battle even for us.
Yeah, I understand. So I want to get to some questions. Do you want to share about the book or should we get to the questions first?
Yes. Let's do both. Let's do the book. So you have the link to post?
Drum roll. Yes, I do. Let me share that with everybody.
Yeah. So you can download a free copy of it at collegenegotiationbook.com/Schneps. And if you can't spell Schneps, just look over
my shoulder.
This shoulder there. Yeah.
And don't worry, we'll also send it to you in an email tomorrow as well, but it's right there in the chat. I put it in the chat so you can just grab that and go ahead and do that. And thank you so much. It's very generous of you to share your book with everybody. So make sure you download it. Do not, he only touched on a portion of it today. So you have an opportunity to learn a lot more. So make sure you do that.
Just word of fair warning, which should not be shocking to anyone. There may be 1 or 2 lame jokes. Some sarcasm, some obnoxiousness. I mean, I'll tell you the short story why I wrote this book is because I once, I guess a couple of years ago, I was looking for a book on how to negotiate, just because I'm always trying to read up on my profession, and I found one written by a guy who's a pretty prominent. I wouldn't mention his name, but he's a pretty prominent financial aid expert, and it was the worst piece of crap I'd ever read. I mean, it was. Most of it had nothing to do with negotiating. Most of it had to do with, well, you're probably not going to succeed if you negotiate, but here's what you should do if you have time to plan. I was like, I can't believe how bad this is. So, because I read other stuff that he's written and it's really good. So that I was like, wow, I'm just going to write it. So apparently there are 2 books now on Amazon and other places on how to negotiate. And his is like a textbook that I think was so good. And mine is, like my personality, which some people might find grating. Maybe someone else might find it entertaining, mildly.
Hey, if you can laugh about all this stuff, I mean, you're already off to the races and winning half the game, because it can be intense. And to be able to talk about this and be able to laugh a little bit and not take it all so seriously the entire time, I think is amazing.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you on a serious note, which is hard for me, that this process is so stressful and so full of anxiety that I really look at our real job, even though my wife and I and our staff were, college advisors, but I think the real business we're in is helping get rid of the stress. And because I figure most people don't want more stress. There are some people who are just looking to be stressed out no matter what, or insulted no matter what. That's fine. They can go to someone else. They don't need us. But I try to diffuse. Well, it's my personality anyway, so I can't help it. But I'm really trying to diffuse it so that you understand that it is all going to work out. The dirty little secret about colleges in general is that there are far more similarities than differences. They literally all buy the same textbooks for the most part. I mean, I knew someone who sold textbooks to colleges, and she told me that I grew up in Massachusetts, so Mass Bay Community College and Harvard both bought the same textbooks. So there aren't. It's not life or death if you don't get into a certain school.
Right. So take the pressure off, get some help, take a deep breath, and you'll be smarter for it. So
self-medicate. By the way, maybe we can do another webinar on that.
Right. Absolutely. So, or yoga. Okay. So on the healthy end. So Karen has a question. Can you talk about how you deal with kids that aren't super smart? So what if a child has IEP and has an average of 8-ish? So what about that?
Yeah. So first of all, I wouldn't. I mean, I know that's just sort of like shorthand on the internet, but I would never say that they're not smart. And I'm not even being like facetious about it or trying to split hairs. People learn differently. Elon Musk is autistic, or he's got Asperger's or something, right? That just came out, and supposedly Einstein was probably Aspergery or something. So there's not much of a stigma, at least at higher education. There might be with peers, who make fun of kids and all that, but there really isn't much in my world. So I don't really look at. I mean, there's some schools that have better programs, to support kids with IEP and other similar types of issues, learning differences. But to me, it's all the same. It's all about trying to optimize each kid's individual abilities and how they look on paper, and walking them through everything I described, the career stuff and backward planning into colleges. So it's really not different at all. It's just that there might be there's different recommendations for every kid, whether or not they have a learning difference.
Right. No, great point. Thank you. Jean wants to know, as 529 plans can reduce financial aid, what are the places to save that do not reduce?
Yeah. So, okay. That's a good question. So I alluded to that, but I don't think I gave the actual places. So if you were to look at the directions to the current FAFSA, it tells you here's what you should disclose in terms of your assets, and it makes a list. And then it says, do not disclose these things. And there are 4 things that should never be put down on this financial aid application. These are the 4, loopholes potentially. One of them is your primary residence. So a lot of people will overinflate their assets and reduce their eligibility by mistakenly putting down the primary residence. Another exempt asset that people frequently make a mistake about is they disclose their retirement accounts, their 401k, their IRAs, etc. Those are also exempt. So if you have the ability to contribute the money that's in there, it does not count against you. But conversely, that can be a big problem if you overshare that. People overshare all their dumb stuff on Facebook about, oh, here are my toes, I'm at the beach, or here's my kale salad that I had for lunch. Okay, so that's just annoying. So I hope no one does that. But if you overshare on your FAFSA, it's going to cost you money. So don't overshare in either place. If you take nothing else away from this presentation.
Another life lesson.
Another unsolicited life lesson. and then the other also my specialty. The other 2 areas that are exemptions are annuities are exempt on the FAFSA. So sometimes people purchase an annuity, and I'm shuddering again because this does not work for everyone. So I'm just giving the high level here. And the 4th exemption is life insurance with cash value. So it's usually in annuities and life insurance where I see people benefiting from sheltering money, but there's all sorts of considerations that you really have to understand before you start willy-nilly like moving money around.
Look, those are some good general ideas, but truly this is a very specific, it has to be a very specific plan to your own finances. But thank you for giving us some of that.
Sure.
So someone wants to know, what should you not say in a financial aid form? Um,
I wouldn't threaten your college president. No, I mean those. So you read the directions very carefully, and that's what she's probably asking about is what I just covered, which is that some stuff gets disclosed, some stuff does not get disclosed, and you just got to, if you're a meticulous person, you're going to do the forms yourself, read through those directions.
Okay. Now, what about scholarships? Is that something that you help with, or what is your advice on that?
So I'm assuming that means the outside scholarships that people hear about if you're like left-handed in Greek and that type of stuff. So I am personally I go after the big money comes from college endowments, and that's need-based and that's merit aid. It's actually there's more merit aid than need-based. But I do have a colleague who I refer like crazy as part of our firm, who's a specialist in those little, but they can add up scholarships. So we do help with that, and it can pay off.
It's hard because there's a badillion of them. So
well, a lot of them are very like scammy sounding, and that's why I never, frankly, took the time to develop any type of expertise. But the ones that seem to be the best are the local ones that that high schools or employers, not the ones that are all over the internet. Those seem to be like fake contests where they get your name and email and they sell it a bunch of times, and then you get all sorts of other solicitations that you never thought you would ever get.
Yeah. Okay. Good advice. Don't do that.
By the way, along those lines, let me just say this.
Yeah.
I kind of alluded to this before, but colleges are businesses. The College Board, which I am a fan of, you can get a lot of great information about colleges, how generous they are. If you look on the College Board website and you look up your colleges. But when your kid registers for the PSAT, for example, on average, the College Board sells each kid's information 19 times over the course of their high school career. So they are in business also of not just collecting testing fees, but all sorts of data sales, and it's a $1 billion industry, business, the College Board.
That's what people have to really remember. So someone was actually just saying about that, wanting to know, about how you find out about whether a college is, generous or stingy, but the College Board website, or, reach out to Andy at lockwoodcollegeprep.com.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good information on the internet. College Board publishes that. There's something called the Common Data Set. So if you're interested in, Syracuse University, what's their average scholarship amount?
Common Data Set?
Set. Yeah. 3 words. Common Data Set. How long does it take to graduate? What's the average award for freshmen versus all undergrads? It's like 17 pages or something of spreadsheets. I would Google Syracuse University Common Data Set, and that's a bunch of data that most schools report about themselves, self-report, and you can just make sure you block out enough time to do that.
Yeah, sounds like it. Evelyn want to know, can you negotiate with state schools?
You can, but it's just harder because they don't have as much money the way they used to. That's been one of the trends that happened long before the pandemic, where state legislatures have been taking money away, at least for the last 15 years, from state budgets. So they give merit aid. Some of them do. Sometimes that's negotiable a little bit. We have limited success each year with some of those schools, but in general, it's harder, mostly because they don't have. When I was saying before about some colleges just aren't generous, most, not all, but most state schools are pretty stingy because they don't have the money.
Right. Again, think about
in and out of state of New York. It's not just New York.
Oh, so if they're to state school in another state, it would be
like Maryland. University of Maryland doesn't give any money.
Right. Okay. Good to know. So we have another question about 529 plans. Angela wants to know, what income level would you recommend participate? And also, does 529 impact merit-based or only needs-based? Does it impact both when you have a 529 negatively?
Okay, so the second part is easy to answer. Merit aid will not be affected at all by anything financially, including the 529, including your other savings, including your income. The first part of the question, what's the magic ceiling for income? You can search high and low on the internet, you won't find it. And the reason for that is because currently, I mentioned this before, there are other factors like the number of kids you have in college. So, so I can give sort of rules of thumb, and that's all they are. Please don't take this as the 10 commandments here. So if you're applying to a state school and you're hoping to get need-based aid, either in or out of the state of, out of the state of New York, then that income really can't be much more than $50,000 to $60,000. The cutoff to get the federal Pell Grant is $50,000 of adjusted gross income, household adjusted gross income. In New York State, they have the Excelsior program, so you can go up to $125,000 of, I believe it's federal adjusted gross income. I was just debating this with my wife a few days ago because it used to be New York State adjusted gross, I think, but she told me I was on drugs or something. For private schools, that number is higher. You can make my basic rule of thumb, again, only rule of thumb, is that the closer you get to $200,000 in adjusted gross income with one child in college, the harder it is to qualify. But if you have two in college, that number can be, 250, 280, somewhere around there. And I don't think that's going to change because most private schools use the other form that I blabbed out to you guys before, the CSS profile. So I think that in general, those are only rules of thumb. There's exceptions. One of the weird things about financial aid is that it's retroactive to 2 years. So if you have someone graduating in 2022, they're looking at your 2020 income. And if you had a high year in 2020, but 2021 was terrible, that's a source of appeal. I read a lot of appeals like that. I know we looked one way on paper 2 years ago when you reviewed my financial aid application based on my adjusted gross income from 2 years ago, but the reality since then is far less rosy.
Okay, thank you.
Way more of an answer than he probably wanted, but I had to do it.
You know what? The more the better. So Norma wanted to know if you are already a senior and already accepted to a college. She's been accepted, it looks like Liberty University. Is it too late to get help?
I mean, I can't help, because everything's pretty much set in stone, at least for this year. But if there was some sort of mistake, maybe I can help for next year. But the die is usually cast by, long before you hear back from all your colleges, because the financial aid applications come out in October of senior year of high school, and we do a lot of our planning before that.
Okay. All right. So if you're not a senior, get moving. If you're not already accepted to college, today's the day to get things.
Yeah, and I just sort of, just to flesh this out, I mentioned this. You reapply for financial aid every year because it's based on your your changes in income and savings and all that. So it is possible if you totally mess up, you overshared, to go back and amend your financial aid application and say, oops, I made a mistake. Can you take another look at our file? Okay. And then going forward, that you need to do that every year. Okay,
great. So we could spend the entire night asking you questions, but I think your wife would kill us. But I do want to thank you so much for all of your incredible information. We've gotten so many people that said, thank you so much. Oh my God, I can't believe this. This is incredible information. So don't stop here. This is where you started. You took the first step in getting help. Go and download the book for free, collegenegotiationbook.com/Schneps. I have it in the chat here. You can also learn more about Andy and his business at lackwoodcollegeprep.com. And I wish you all of you very good luck in the journey of college and beyond. Andy, thank you. You always give the best jewels of knowledge, and thank you for your generosity.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to our attendees for joining. I wish you all to stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy the wonderful long weekend, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.